does the NSA collect any type of data at all on millions or hundreds of millions of Americans?
No, sir.
It does not.
Not wittingly. There are cases where they could inadvertently, perhaps, collect, but not wittingly.
You don't need privacy if you have nothing to hide. That was a common defense of government mass surveillance Edward Snowden faced during an Ask Me Anything session on Reddit. To this, Snowden responded with, "Arguing that you don't care about the right to privacy because you have nothing to hide is no different than saying you don't care about free speech because you have nothing to say." He just gave the right to free speech and the right to privacy equal standing. But in the digital world, privacy and free speech are even more closely related than that. Online privacy is free speech. If it wasn't, commercial internet would have never taken off, and we wouldn't have online banking or even services like Facebook, Amazon, or Android. But in the 1990s, the government fiercely attacked online privacy by classifying encryption software as a munition and regulated it as biological weapons or firearms. Exporting encryption was heavily restricted, required a government license, and made its implementation on the internet virtually impossible. At the dawn of the commercial internet, the digital realm was a war zone between hackers who believed computer technology should be free from centralized control and the alliance of the US government with big telco corporations who wanted to impose that control. The US government successfully launched a crackdown on hackers as a publicity stunt to claim more powers and control over the internet. Encryption became the public enemy of the law enforcement, and the government agencies were granted expansive authority over distribution of computer technologies. But the resistance was far from over. In 1991, Phil Zimmermann developed his first version of an encryption program called Pretty Good Privacy, designed to secure email communications, files, or even entire disks. 2 years later, Zimmermann was under criminal investigation for exporting munitions without a license and was barred from sharing his software on the internet. But the father of modern encryption knew better. Zimmermann published the whole PGP source code in a hardcover book distributed by MIT Press. In a digital form, PGP was an outlawed piece of software. Printed in a book, it was a free speech protected by the Constitution. This exceptionally brilliant case of trolling and the lack of consistent principles the US government had when regulating the internet. But the government was not challenged in court over this case, and it continued the practice of restrictive exports on encryption. In 1994, a graduate student at the University of California, Daniel Bernstein, was developing an encryption algorithm that he intended to publish, distribute, and share openly on public lectures and on the internet. However, the US Department of State classified his cryptographic software under the Arms Export Control Act and the International Traffic in Arms Regulations. Bernstein was threatened with a $1 million fine and even prison time if he was to proceed to publish his encryption source code and related documents. Bernstein thought this was a violation of his First Amendment rights, and he went on to challenge the government in court. After several years of legal battles, the court eventually decided that Bernstein's source code is protected by the Constitution. The judge ruled that a computer language used to build encryption tools is no different from German or French or even music and mathematical equations. The case Bernstein versus the United States thus set a long-lasting precedent. Code is speech. By the 2000s, export restrictions on encryption were relaxed, and commercial encryption was no longer counted as a munition. This was a major victory that freed the internet economy from burdensome government regulations. Use of encryption could no longer be considered illegal, so the only way for the government to gain access to online communications was to go around it. The government's wild card became the Patriot Act that granted the National Security Agency backdoor access to data centers of major tech companies and wiretap fiber optic cables to monitor internet traffic. But the encryption is still there. You are still allowed to use, deploy, and distribute strong encryption to secure your data, and it's thanks to the enduring will of privacy advocates to win the case Bernstein versus the United States. So why are these old cases still relevant today? Because the argument that you have nothing to fear if you have nothing to hide still resonates. It sounds like common sense, but it's a fallacy. Free speech and privacy are not separable. Mass surveillance is a backdoor to the First Amendment. When you can monitor what everybody does on the internet, you can censor speech or manipulate discourse on a massive scale. Online privacy protects you from censorship. Encryption allows you to express yourself publicly but anonymously. It lets you develop and try ideas before you are comfortable to share them with others. It gives you a space with your own borders where you are free from judgment and control. The First Amendment grants you the right to encrypted speech. The goal of mass surveillance is to build government backdoor into encryption software so that they always have full access to your data. But it's technologically impossible to build a secure encryption with a universal key being held by a third party. It would fundamentally undermine encryption and thus would strip people from their right to encrypted communication. Free speech is essential at standing up to power and authority, but some people might not be able to exercise this right on the internet if doing so would create a permanent record tied to their real-world identity. You shouldn't be forced to disclose your identity along with a record of your entire digital presence every time you want to express your opinion. What if speaking up against your employer could cost you your job? What if being politically active could result in permanent harassment and receiving violent threats? What if you could get fired from your job because of your political belief you expressed online? In the digital world, your right to privacy is married with the right to free speech. Privacy advocates should start reviving this rhetoric. It might resonate a lot better with people who aren't familiar with encryption. Free speech doesn't exist if everything is being monitored and collected for later judgment. If people can have their careers destroyed over things they said on social media 10 years ago, how can you be safe 10 years from now if everything you say in private gets collected today? If you want to secure your information now and protect your speech from the future, start migrating to encrypted open source software. Switch to ProtonMail for email, Nextcloud for cloud storage, Signal for voice calls and instant messaging. If you want to learn how to comprehensively protect your online privacy, check out my playlist of tutorials that will show you how it's done without needing any tech expertise. Share this video and comment your thoughts to enrich the debate on online privacy and free speech. Thank you for watching.